Ha, yeah, y'all know what time it is. So just sit back and relax because the show's about to start. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? This is Down to Earth Talk. And we are live. We're live right now, and we are excited that you're here with us today. On this show, we remember when we did this before, I had that nice little opening.
Yeah, where you go?
I'd be able to like say exactly what the show was in a few sentences. I need to figure out what that was again. But I'm Danny Eley, and I am here with Sherry Williams, and she is there with.
Thank you.
She's there with the ladies. I can see. I saw them a second ago.
Who? Oh, the girls. Yeah, there's Emily there, and Destiny doesn't want to be shown, but it's okay. Like I said, I got back from a meeting, and we're in Mississippi, so I didn't realize I had to feed them. You know, that's what a good parent does, right? So I had to feed them. They were hungry.
Okay.
The lobby breakfast was over, and I'm like, "Come on, let's go." Oh no, I got Danny's email. That's now. I got to do this. Oh yeah, we're an hour behind. I get it. Okay, so here we are.
Here we are. And we've been on the last couple episodes. We were gone last week. We had to take care of some stuff. But 2 weeks ago, we finished our talk on the 7 pillars of family, which is a cultural, what's the word? It's a part of our culture at ATAP. And we were just talking and discussing, and we were talking about maybe we should just kind of talk about some of the stuff that make us a different company. Like, we are definitely a different company. Sherry, when you founded ATAP, you created it in a way that, you made it a certain way, but can you talk really quickly about kind of your experience and kind of establishing the company and ways that you kind of discovered that you could do things differently?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a good little segue from how do we take those pillars that we represent and incorporate them into an organization or a business. And sometimes because we are who we are, it is different. But I'm sure other companies have something similar to this, to where their teams care about each other, and it's not rocket science. It's just treating people as we want to be treated, and that was what you asked me to kind of talk about. Was like I was working a position at one point for an employer, and it was fine. I had good relationships with the people I worked with, but I just, I don't know. I just felt in my heart that I needed to do something different and do it in a different way and provide the type of services we do, resident services, in a way that was less corporate. And I shared with this shout out to Quincy Jackson. He's our new services coordinator in Jackson, Mississippi. I don't know if he'll see this, but eventually he will. But we were talking yesterday about we have a corporate. We do not have a corporate atmosphere, but a corporate structure, a corporate culture.
Yeah.
But a corporate structure, because corporate is good. There's nothing wrong with corporate, but it's when corporate kind of overlooks people and overlooks how people feel and treating others how you want to be treated. And sometimes in a corporate mindset, you don't see that as much. You see the bottom line. You see the, instead of, hey, are you okay? You didn't show up to work today. Now, of course, people have got to call in and blah, blah, blah. We got those policies and we have corporate structure. But then at the same time, we do care about folks, and we try to work with them, and we try to bring our humanity to this corporate thing that we have, and just be people. And you know how hard it is for us to let someone go. I mean, they've got to be blatant, like, dude, you know how many times I've questioned myself, like, am I making the right decision? Because but then it's just sometimes you have to, but we always put the needs of people before we put a bottom line.
Right.
And I wanted to, when we first started this, I didn't have a clue what we were doing when we first started this, to be completely honest. But you know, at that time, it was just myself and Daryl, my brother, who was the background guy. Every time we hear that, I miss him, and I want to go and I want to punch him in the forehead, because that's how we roll. We love each other. And but like, we just started this just to serve people. And you know, oftentimes when you start something, you kind of forget why you started it, and you get kind of, there's so much more to do that you kind of lose sight of why you started. And I think sometimes, and this has nothing to do with marriage, but like sometimes it's kind of like, you know, marriage, you fall out of love or whatever, and then you forgot why you fell in love with that person, and then you start treating them with less value. And so when we started ATAP, I just kind of always in a place to try to remember and put, even though the responsibilities, you know, this can pile up, can stack, and you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get all this done? But I remember why we do it. And we want to treat people with respect and people with dignity, and use the tool of relationship, a family relationship, to be able to help advance a person to the next level. But it's not just about us. Like, oh my gosh, you know how many times, like, I've been going through some major life things, and I'm not in this thinking what I'm bringing to the table. I'm thinking what we as a community are beginning to build together, and we support one another. I don't know how many times I was going through something. I showed up to a community, and they're like, "You okay, Miss Sherry?" It's like, "No, not really. Kind of got some stuff going on." Well, it's going to be okay. And then, like, through relationship, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're building. And I pinch myself every day that we actually get paid to do this. And it's just amazing to me. But that's how it started. I didn't want to I wanted to treat people with absolute respect and dignity. I wanted unity. And through, honestly, just some prayer, I asked God, well, how do we do this? And then he just started showing us.
I think that the thing is I think that when you're starting something, you know, and you start to realize that it's actually something that's going to grow and be something that's going to, you know, be impactful in the lives of your quote unquote customers, but also in the lives of the people that work with you. You know, you start to go, okay, well, how do we run processes? And a lot of time process is something that isn't necessarily people focused, right? It's like you said earlier, we don't want to be bottom line, but a lot of time process is, how can we benefit the most financially from this? What can we do to make the most money from this? And that's honestly, like, you know, I tell people all the time, our job is definitely unique and different in the fact that we are in the people business. A lot of times companies do not exist to employ employees. Companies exist with the bottom line. Companies exist to make money. And so in you creating this company, you kind of had to do things differently. Like, you had to look at things in a way that a traditional business ran would not look at things. And maybe, you know, oftentimes you and I are reading leadership books from, you know, titans of industry. I recently listened to an interview with the founder of Home Depot, and just how he started his company, and which is amazing, because did you know he started Home Depot after he turned 50 years old? Like, he had lived an entire life, and then he went and started this, you know, incredible company. But you know, sometimes they'll use the things that we have as our company culture as really important things for us that are they'll use those sometimes as gimmicks, right? Or they'll use them as phrases. They'll use them as a way to try to convey a heart that they might not necessarily have, but they want to have. But for us, it really is true. Like when we say that your family, we are family. You know, we do our best to be family to all of our employees and to all the people that we're working with. And so when you started ATAP and when you founded it, I'm sure that you had some things that even at the very beginning, you were saying, as a company, I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to do things, and I'm sure you probably had some pushback from other business leaders saying, "Oh, you shouldn't do it this way. You should do it this way." I know, you know, when you're starting something, you're always asking for advice, and people always want to give their 2 cents on how you should operate things. But there's some great things that our company has that I think that are just things that came from your heart. Like I remember you telling me about the time that you decided that we would have a day off birthday. You get your birthday off.
Sorry.
That's all right.
All right. I was going to ask, can I take a bite? But I didn't want to interrupt you.
But
It was screaming at me.
I remember you telling me about that, and I remember you telling me you were working your job and you were working on your birthday, and you were like, "This sucks. I wish I had my birthday off." And I remember you saying, "If I ever start a company, I'm going to give everybody their birthday off." And that's something that is in our organization. And so when you started this, you know, I think you looked at things in a way that you said, "I don't have to follow the traditional rules on how to run a company. This is a different company." And of course, when you first started this, you didn't even realize this was a company. You thought this was just something that you were doing, something that was going to be helpful. You didn't realize, you know, however many, 14, 15 years ago, that this would turn into something that it is today, where you're now sitting in Mississippi, I'm sitting in California, and we're making things happen.
Yeah, well, honestly, when we, yeah, you're right. I didn't have any clue. I didn't know anything, like zero, nothing. Like when I met the first group that hired us on to do this and on a contract basis, I didn't even know how to write a contract. And so, you know, you can learn kind of, we're talking about like what we would do and would not do and how we would be different. But from the very beginning, like I was completely and totally like dependent upon God to show me. And so like when I first met the company that hired us, I didn't even know how to write a contract. So wouldn't you know, man, as my brother in Minnesota would say, and some of his friends out there, that God placed me over contract compliance, right? And so I go back to my job, and as soon as I get back from this meeting, I was doing things honest. Like my boss sent me to a meeting, a crime-free training meeting, and I just happened to know all the landlords in because it's an apartment complex setting. And so here I am, and I know them all because they know I was their Section 8 caseworker. And so here I am just kind of having a simple conversation, and I heard them talking about our first community, Laurelwoods, and that they needed a services coordinator, and they didn't know what they were going to do. And I wasn't unhappy in my job. I didn't know how long term I was going to do it because I had this in my heart. But I just decided from the get that if this is what I'm called to do with my life, then I need our unseen God to show me what to do with it and how to be. And from the very beginning, he told me to put on blinders and look at him and just follow him. And he would show me, like, come on, I'll admit this now because we're way past this, but like the first 6 months, they sent us a check, right? And I didn't have payroll. I didn't pay taxes. Like we've resolved this, IRS. So if you're watching it, we pay taxes now. But when we first started, I didn't know what to do, right? And so I went to the bank, and the bank was like, "Oh, you need to talk to them, Paychecks." And then they transferred us over to Paychecks. And then the person that hired us first, he was like, "Oh, you need this insurance, you need that insurance." I'm like, how do I do this? And apparently God wanted us to do this because he sent a person in every season of the first few months to show us what to do and how to do it. And then when I was asking for a name, I was like, okay, God, what do I name it? And he was like, well, he just gave it to me. All things are possible. Because what I have you doing, sometimes only thing people need is a tap. And that's true. And sometimes when I tell this story, I feel kind of corny telling it, but like it's really true. Like, you don't need to scream, you don't need to yell. You can quietly tap someone, and that gets people's attention. And I think the only thing the growing pains of it all, I don't know. I don't like to be called a boss. I don't
Right.
like that at all. I want to be a partner. And when someone calls me a boss, that makes me cringe. Because maybe that's because of past bosses that I've had, and I never will be that. But I don't know. I'm just a regular person, like everyone else. You're a regular person, and we're just trying to do our small part. All we can do is encourage and go in communities and be ourselves. And then it's up to the resident or whomever we're serving, the person, to receive the encouragement, and then they do the work. So, like, how can, I think sometimes people get fat heads when they start something and they start to feel, I'm not saying I don't think I'm important. I know God has given me that, but I don't think I'm important based upon what I do. I mean, my family looks at me as important, I think. Yeah, they do. And, um, but I think that's how we're different. And I don't want to ever grow to a place to where we're a bunch of big shots attending meetings and we're not still with the people. And someone asked me that question about a week ago, like, "Oh, you still work in a community?" Yeah. Why wouldn't I love working with kids and families, and I've recently determined how I have just a out there passion for seniors now too. I had a passion, but
Right.
working closely with the seniors, I wish I could give just my job away, and then I just want to be a services coordinator. But I guess that's how we're different, and I guess it's not rocket science. We just can't let our heads get too inflated as we're walking journeys of doing business, I guess. That's a simplistic way to put it. I'm going to take another bite, okay?
Sounds good. Yeah, and specifically today, one of the things that we're talking about is servant leadership, and we've kind of hinted around that through most of this episode so far. Is that's one of the things that, as we were kind of establishing our structure, leadership structure, it was something that was evident. We didn't always have a name for it, but it was something that it was always the way that we operated. And then we discovered, hey, there's a name for this way that we do things, and it's called servant leadership. And servant leadership is really the basis idea of it. It means that we take leadership not as the traditional idea. It actually is a very traditional idea of leadership, but not as the way leadership is looked at today. A lot of time when you see leadership today, it's looked at as if it is, the top, and you are at the top of the pile, and that you give the commands that go down to the other people. You're the, leadership. There's so much that's about leadership, that everything that rises and falls on the leader, right? Like every responsibility goes to the leader. Everything goes to leadership. And so a lot of time leadership is looked at as this structure of I'm at the top, and what I say goes, because it's ultimately going to affect me. But the idea of servant leadership is the idea that the people that work with you or work under you are not your servants, that you are the servant, right? The idea is that you're serving the people that are underneath you to give them a better connection to the things that they want to be connected to, right? So where a more traditional leader would be focused on the bottom dollar, the bottom line, servant leadership would be focused on how does this affect the team? How does this affect my individual employee that's working for me? How does this decision affect them? How does this, and then in turn, what we hope is that because we are in the people business, while we are working with our employees and we are serving them, that they are then taking that same service to the people that they work with, right? They're serving the people that they're working with. And so that's one of the most important things I think that we have, is that it's an example to the people that work with us, to our coordinators. It's an example to them, the way that we treat them, the way that we work with them, the way that we operate with them is something that they then turn and apply that same level of care to the people that they're working with. And so it's not always an easy style of leadership, because it definitely requires a lot more. It requires a lot more for you to kind of put your pride down. There's many times where we'll be talking maybe to a disgruntled employee or something along those lines, and they'll give us feedback or criticism, constructive criticism, right? And it's like, do you even know like what we've been through? Do you know that we've already gone through this? That's what you want to say, right? You want to say those things, but you don't, because servant leadership, because you're focused on building that person up and building that leader up so that they can accomplish the things that they need to accomplish. And it's not a manipulation tactic either. I think sometimes a lot of people will try to use servant leadership in a manipulative form, in a like, well, I'm going to serve you, so and they'll I've worked for leaders that have done this, where they'll say things like, I'm taking this hit for you, but the reality is they're not taking the hit, and so servant leadership, I think, is a very impactful tool to employ in your company. What are some of your thoughts specifically on servant leadership?
Well, just kind of on this topic, when you were talking about employees who have, or staff members or family members, we try to call everyone family members until they become staff. I think it transitions from, because like within family, there's a level of trust, right? And so when I'm passionate about something and you're passionate about something, there are times when you will say, okay, but, and then I will say, okay, but if this happens, just know. And so there's that level of trust within the family relationship, which you and I have, and there's many of us that have that are within ATAP. We have that with one another. But then sometimes there are staff members that they don't want to be family and they want to be staff, and they want to go based upon and make decisions based upon their experience, or and which is fine, because I think it'd be rather big-headed for any person in a leadership role to think that they have all the answers, and to not listen to someone else who maybe their idea is better. And we are not offended if someone has a different idea than us. We've been looking at this pretty solid for a long time, over a decade. So maybe we're not seeing something. But it takes humility and understanding and knowing that not one person has all the answers. But then say, okay, one of the top ones that I can think of, a staff member says, I want to have my Halloween celebration on the 31st. We know good and well that that's not going to work, because people are leaving on Halloween and people are going trick-or-treating, and you won't have a community building event that's solid if you do something on the actual day. We know this from experience, but we'll say, If they're adamant about it, we'll say, okay, well, try it. If it goes in this direction, we told you so, and maybe you'll listen the next time, and we'll allow that direction for the sake of trying to encourage a staff member to be able to do what makes the most sense.
Right.
And we're not trying to have our way. I think that's one of the things I struggle with personally, is when I'm really adamant about something. I don't want anyone to think I'm trying to be a dictator, but I also know based upon experience that this usually happens when you do this. And so, but I'm also, if it takes someone learning the hard way, then I'm good with that too. And I don't know necessarily if that's the right answer all the time, but in talking about servant leadership, there's a whole life called, or a whole component called people have choices. And
Right.
we want to make room for people's choices to either prove, hey, this sounds horrible, but either to prove us wrong or make us better. I don't even know if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay, so I don't know. Kind of forgot. I went on a rabbit trail. I forgot what I was saying. But servant leadership. I'm trying to stay on that track. But I've got two kids over here. Look at they're doing taekwondo at the and I'm like, oh, geez, look at cheese. Wonderful. So not everybody, I think, appreciates that leadership way, the style of leadership. But we're not.
Yeah, sometimes people want to be told what to do and they don't want to be a part of the process.
Yeah, but we're also not trying to develop robots.
Right.
And yes, ma'am, yes, that's we say that all the time. We're not yes people. If you disagree with me, tell me. Tell me why. That's what I'm thinking is not right or wrong. And I don't think in your traditional corporate type mentality, you're not going to get a CEO that. And I'm not trying to promote myself or nothing like that, but I don't. It's rare that you get. There are some that will be like that because obviously we know the people that are working closer to the communities than or to the customer, they know because they're there. And some corporate mindset leaders do have that understanding, but then a lot don't.
Right.
So forgot again what I was saying.
That's all right. I think
All right.
that we have a couple minutes left, and I think that one of the benefits that we can kind of talk about in the last minute and a half here is we talked about this on the business level, what servant leadership looks like, what it looks like in our company culture and our structure that we have. But I'd like to talk about, because everything that we have in our culture, in our company culture, goes down. It's not just for business; it's also for our personal lives. And so I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about how this idea, or this concept of servant leadership, also blends into our families, and we utilize servant leadership with our families in our personal life. And for me, it really is that the concept of as I'm leading my family, as I'm leading my wife and my children, that I am the leader of the house. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And the reality is my word is final. But that doesn't mean that I don't include them and I don't serve them and I don't allow them to have a voice and have a place where they're involved. And that comes from a place of desiring to serve them. And so personal life, what do you think servant leadership means?
Well, to me, it means not assuming I know everything and listening to the people in my life, considering my family, considering how even like coming to Mississippi, I mean, Ronnie will support anything I want. And he's so supportive and loving and kind, and he'll do what I need to do. But then there's also, I consider him, if this isn't a good time for you, Ronnie, we won't go. Or if this is, I'm not only thinking about myself, thinking about how my actions and my thoughts in my life, and sometimes I get a little overboard with work
Y'all know
and
what time it is.
considering them. I think that's considering my family, and it does make the family relationship stronger.
Yep. I agree. That is our show this week. Hope that you guys enjoyed the conversation that we had on servant leadership. I want to give a huge shout out to James, who's in the chat, who's a part of this conversation, who is sending messages throughout. And thank you for being with us, James, today live. And we will be back next week for another episode of Down to Earth Talk. See you then.
I'll be at home.